Teachers, what was the worst thing you had to confiscate from a student?
Over the course of years. Bottle of vodka, hidden, in the girls' bathroom by 7th graders. How did you know where to look? Everyone who came back from the bathroom was drunk, so you're not as sneaky as you think. Vape, my mum gave it to me for allergies. So, I'll just give it back to her then. Wide eyes. No. Student banging the primers of two 3006 shells together in class. Grab. I just wanted to see if they would go off.
I love stories like those first two where the kid just doesn't have the life experience needed to understand how obvious the lie is or how quickly we can figure out if it is a lie. Like a toddler swearing he didn't steal any chocolate while it's smeared all over his face.
Napalm. Some kids were into petrol gas sniffing but found it hard to transport and keep hidden, so they learned how to make napalm so they could carry it hidden in their bags. I had to lock down the whole school and get hazmat in to dispose of it. And how did they find out how to make it? They asked one of the science teachers and he told them.
I got in trouble for looking up how to make napalm in HS freshman year. I actually got caught because a friend told me about the Anarchist Cook website. I went on it and checked the ingredients because ours wasn't potent enough, anticlimactic. Got caught by a substitute and was sent to the office where IT scoured who else went on that website. I didn't know what anarchist meant at the time, lol. During my review, the chemistry teacher asked me what it said. I told him styrofoam and gasoline. Well, did it work? Chem T. Not really, was just jelly gasoline. That's because you need to double boil it to change the chemical composition more. But with the fumes and an open flame you're asking for trouble. The best way is to use a bathtub with the water heater up really high, this way there is no flame. Gotta have IT block this website at school, Chem T. I got a central detention and had him for chem the next year.
Not necessarily the craziest thing to confiscate, but the effect that confiscating the item had on the student was pretty upsetting. For background, I am an elementary special education teacher for students with emotional disabilities and intense behaviors. These students have behaviors that range from yelling, throwing things, and leaving the classroom to students who have attempted suicide and students who have assaulted their peers or the school staff. I even had a student go for a cop's gun one time. The student in question was in first grade at the time and fairly low-key compared to some of the other kids I had. This student and I had a good relationship as I was one of the only male staff in the building. He lacked a reliable male figure in his life, and for the majority of his kindergarten year, I was the primary teacher working with him. One day my student had asked to use the restroom, and for most of my students, our staff will escort them to and from the restroom, so I went with him. Now it's been several years so the details are fuzzy, but somehow it was brought to my attention that there was burnt toilet paper in the boys' restroom. I can't remember if my student or another student told me, but I want to say it was my own student. This sets off some alarms in my head, so I contact my admin team so they're aware. As we're going forward with our day, I notice that my student is fidgety and messing with something in their jacket pocket. So I ask him if I can check their pocket, and instead of saying yes, he pulls out a little Bic lighter and tells me that he found it and asks me to keep it a secret. Of course I can't just turn a blind eye, so I report it to my admin team and we sit down with the student to talk about fire safety. We explained how playing with lighters isn't safe and that he could hurt himself or others if he accidentally started a fire that got out of control. My student feels awful. He's apologizing and feeling remorseful. He admits to us that he had been messing around with lighters at home when his mum was sleeping. We contacted his mother to tell her what had happened and what he had told us, and her response was, unfortunate. She was furious with us. Told us there was no way that he had brought a lighter, and that it must have been planted by a peer. That we coerced a confession out of him and that she was pulling him out of school immediately. Within a year the family's house burned down, and my former student was severely burned in the fire.
My mum has been a primary teacher for her whole life now in the UK, and the worst incident she had to deal with was with a girl aged 10 who was having issues with a boy essentially bullying her. She told her dad, and her dad's solution was to give her a sawn-off shotgun to intimidate the boy. No one knew it was unloaded, but the hell it raised when a 10-year-old schoolgirl brings out a shotgun certainly put the boy off from ever coming near her again.
I'm sorry, but the image of a little 10-year-old holding what is probably a 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun is hilarious to me. Probably was a quarter the size of her and would send her half a kilometer in the other direction if she tried to use it. Thank God it was unloaded though. That would have been a very, very traumatizing day for everyone involved.
A crossbow. property of a 17-year-old student at the boarding school where I used to work. The same boy was also fond of bringing pheasants to school that he'd killed on his father's estate and plucking them in the shower block.
Not a teacher, but I'm half deaf and my music teacher took my hearing aid and refused to accept that it wasn't an earbud. Then he yelled at me for the rest of the class for not playing in tune. Couldn't exactly tell how well I was playing since I could hear it.
My friend is diabetic and has an insulin pump. They had multiple teachers over the years think it's an MP3 player and try to confiscate it before realizing it's asterisk attached to their body and they literally can't hand it over.
A huge black dildo. A child found it in the school's garden and said, "I found a ding-dong in the garden and I'm taking it home for mum." That day, I was not professional.
What a thoughtful child.
A note that said, "So you gonna give the DK or what?" I teach 12-year-olds.
The best note I ever intercepted. Him, "Can I bite your boob tonight?" Her, IDK, depressed.
My wife is a teacher and one of her first graders brought her 2 hard seltzers because her mom said they're good after a long day and she deserved them.
My friend taught at a prestigious all-boy high school. She was grocery shopping and buying a couple cases of wine to restock her wine rack. Of course, she runs into a student and his mother. The kids say, "Hi Ms. Shish, wow, that is a lot of alcohol." His mom looks at him and says, "You're probably the reason she has to drink like that." Teacher replies, "No, it's all of them." For Christmas that year, the same kid gave her a $200 gift card to a wine store.
Someone in my class had their phone taken because their Siri went off and said, "What do you need from me, slut?"
Thank you for the idea. Preschool teacher here. I had to convince a 4-year-old that his mom's wedding ring should go into a special box on the front desk instead of on the finger of a 6-year-old girl he had a crush on. Later he brought in his dad's car keys and a bottle opener.
I think I have heard things like this before. The kid actually gave the ring to the girl, who kept it, and when the boy's mother found out, she asked the other parents to return it and they refused, saying it was a gift.
Know a teacher, she and her first or second grade class, can't remember which, were on lunch. Lunch lady walks up and tells her one of her students just tried to buy an extra something with over $1,000 in cash she had stuffed in a tiny coin pouch that looked like a plushy pink duck. Teacher called the girl's house and the mom was 9.8 into a full-blown 10 out of 10 panic after looking for it all morning. This was the early 2000s when it was still normal to pay bills in cash, in person. Apparently they forgot to give the girl her allowance, 50 cents, so she took the paper money instead. A dead squirrel. I taught preschool at the time.
I once did that too. My primary school girlfriend got kissed by a dude from her class and I was super mad, because he was stronger than me and I couldn't just get back at him with the same thing. The next day, I hear animals fighting on my way to school, and moments later, a squirrel falls dead from a tree. I have no idea what killed it, but it didn't look wounded. So I threw out my lunch and put it in the now empty bag. The kid who kissed my girlfriend was, and still is, a notorious liar, so when they found it in his bag, nobody believed it wasn't him, and he couldn't say anything to prove it wasn't. He wasn't even able to say that it wasn't even his bag where the squirrel was in, because he was known for stealing other kids' lunch. I guess it was my perfect crime.
I had to confiscate hand sanitizer from a student who decided to drink it to get drunk and threw up everywhere.
And this is why, kids, it is important to listen in chemistry class.
Penis-shaped glass pipe with WD still in the balls bowl. Mom asked if she would be getting it back or if the school was keeping it.
Well, did the school keep it?
When I was in 5th grade there was an active market in live bees. Some kids figured out that the weight of the average 5th grader briefly stepping on a bee, in the grass, would stun it for about a minute without actually killing it. They started going out in teams to scout bees on the field, stun them, and carefully scoop them into plastic sandwich bags. They'd then sell them to other students who'd release them in classrooms to waste class time and scare people. You could get honeybees for 25 cents apiece. Bumblebees and yellowjackets cost more. Teachers and school admin started cracking down on this. Teachers literally confiscated live bees in plastic bags from students when found, and they eventually had to start having someone watch the field to catch students in the act. Edit. A lot of people saying they had something similar, and where was this? This was East Bay Area, Northern California. If that sounds like you, it was the elementary school that had the same name as the nearby community swimming pool, and the custodian named Fred whom everyone thought was the best. This was spring of '05, though it may have happened other years too.
Gimme 5 bees for a quarter, you'd say.
My mom always told the story about my brother bringing a signed picture of Richard Petty to his class and telling everyone he was his dad, 2nd grade maybe, but that everyone forgot because the next kid pulled out an antique gun.
I had a similar experience, but it was with a grenade. Still had the pin it in and the whole school was evacuated. Edit found the news story and it wasn't WW2.
Not a teacher, but I watched quite a funny confiscation while in detention as a sophomore in high school. I was reading a book just trying to make the time go by when our vice principal, who was monitoring detention that day, stepped out for a moment. All of a sudden I hear a cracking sound and I look up from my book to see a broken egg on the floor. The few kids in the room look around at each other confused, nobody owns up to it, and nobody knows who did it because we were all distracted when it happened. The vice principal returns, doesn't notice the egg, but he's so engrossed in his paperwork that this kid still gets away with throwing another egg. Everyone looks up, the VP asked what that noise was, and this kid holds up a broken pencil and apologizes. Everyone goes back to minding their business, but all the students now know who the culprit is. Finally, this kid throws one last egg, but unfortunately the VP looked up from his papers right as he threw it. He walked over to the kid's desk, asked him what he thought he was doing, and the kid goes, "Just cracking jokes." VP holds out his hand and the kid reveals an entire carton of eggs from under his sweatshirt and hands it to him. VP looked so unfazed that I honestly wondered what else that man has seen. I was honestly glad I got detention that day.
VPs probably have seen some weird-ass poo in their days considering they've worked long enough to become a VP.
Not mine, but my fiancé's co-worker confiscated a makeshift shank from a 3rd grader, roughly 8 years old, made from a popsicle stick and a straw. He said he was going to use it on his animals at home. Best part was when they told the dad, he said, "Why did you give him supplies to make a shank?" I assume he's gonna kill a few people in the future.
I taught 1st grade and confiscated a piece of a broken beer bottle from a 6-year-old. It really surprised me, because he was the sweetest kid. Turns out another classmate asked him to bring a weapon and hide it in the playground sand, so that he could get back at another kid. I tried to do more life lesson things than suspension for both boys. BC they're freaking 6, but school policy had them both suspended for a few days. Edit I can't believe this comment got so many likes, comments, and awards. This was seriously just the way life was at the school I taught at. I've taken many years off teaching now to be a stay-at-home mom, but I truly miss the kids I used to teach at this school. They were sweet little kids who just needed guidance. I think about these kids all the time, and I plan to go back to working in a district like this soon enough. They're amazing kids and families who just need a bit more guidance than average. But they can all be successful with the right help.
WTF did I just read? A 6-year-old was planning a murder-revenge plot in the playground sandbox?
In 3rd grade, I once had my entire deck of only holographic Yu-Gi-Oh cards confiscated from me for playing with them during break time too much with friends. I was told I'd be able to get them back when I graduated school, 6th grade. I said okay, not totally understanding what was going on. I forgot about them completely, though I still kept a vested interest in the TCG for a few more years, like into 5th grade, until 9th grade. I went back and asked my old 3rd grade teacher to return my property. Within seconds, she pulls them out of her desk drawer and hands me them. It was an odd experience. Edit. At 18.4k karma, this comment alone has given me more than 44 times my entire previous year's karma. Wow. Thanks so much, everyone. I tried to respond to as many folks as I could. This was an awesome way to spend a day off.
Knowing a few teachers, I wouldn't be surprised if she had been waiting for you to come back for them.
Worst thing, bullets. From a 1st grader. Had to do a room clear to look for a gun. Best thing, a cat a high school student brought in their backpack, haha.
Confiscated 3 knives from one kid, but the weirdest thing was a pee video from a 9-year-old girl. She brought it to school to show off to the boys. Took it from her grandfather's stash. Big tit fantasies and anal desires. Had to read it to the short-sighted 60-year-old vice principal. I was 21, at the time.
Kind of off topic, but why did you have to read it to the VP? In what world does this conversation take place? Lol. Op. VP, I had to confiscate a pornographic video from one of the students today. VP. What's the name of the video? Op. I don't think that's relevant. VP. I said, what's the name of the video?
Haha, she was short-sighted and didn't have her glasses. Gave her the tape and she tried to read it and couldn't. Was squinting at it asking what it said.
So far, a death letter that a severely antisocial asocial student wrote after a minor incident with a peer. The letter told the student to kill themselves, to die already, etc. and depicted bloody, slashed wrists. I truly think the student didn't intend to give the other student the letter because they never talked to anyone, but that was some effed up poo to see from a kid.
A taser disguised as a torch.
My son made one of these from a capacitor. I think there is a YT video on it. His got taken off him by a teacher at, hold on.
So right out of uni, about 25-ish, I took a job teaching at a school in the capital of our country. Lots of poverty and the level of education was low in these teenagers. First day on the job, a kid takes out this hacking knife and starts attacking the furniture with it. For some weird reason I just walked up to him and demanded he give it to me. Which worked. But it just as easily could have not worked. During the same job I also had multiple conversations with students about how sexual misconduct towards the teacher, me, isn't okay. I also got locked in a classroom with 10 angry male students, including the one from the knife incident. In the end I left because the administration didn't back me up.
That's rotten. Teenage dudes are probably the worst to teach for female teachers. I've had so many classmates who act juvenile as F when they get a female teacher. This year it was a common joke in my class to say, "Yes sir," when answering roll call to my female teacher, because she was mildly strict. She's also quite authoritative, so she gets called bitch a lot behind her back. She handled it well luckily. Also sucks because she was an amazing teacher who put a lot of effort into her class.
The weirdest one was definitely the fish in a vase they found during locker checks. It was in an unassigned locker someone had added a lock to. Inside was a live betta fish in about as large a vase as you can fit in a locker. Fully decorated. Someone had clipped a little book light to the top of the vase, presumably so fish wasn't in the dark all the time. No one claimed to know whose if was or how long it had been there, so it lived in the coach's office for at least that year.
Wait, what did the fish feed on?
I think it had a jar of fish food in the locker as well. It had clearly been cared for. No one could figure out how it had gotten in unnoticed and been cared for though.
Not a teacher, but when I was in 2nd grade a kid brought his mom's vibrator to class cause he thought it was a toy submarine. Obviously we didn't know any better until years later when that same kid told us how embarrassed his mum was to this day.
OMG, how did the teacher hold it together?
Not a teacher, but a bus driver. I had to confiscate a 5th grader's cell phone a few days ago, specifically because he was showing hardcore P to 1st graders with it. Lots of phone calls that day.
I know of an opposite story. A school bus driver that had hardcore P mags stashed in the bus.
Most dangerous, a knife from an 8th grader. Most annoying, different school than above, but a Wi-Fi jammer and a USB killing device from an 8th grader.
I need to know, did they say why they had a Wi-Fi jammer and a ISB killer? I figure they were playing a pretty pooty prank or they were trying to take down some school systems.
Just the kind of kid he was. I ran into him again when he was in 10th or 11th grade and he'd matured a lot.
My beyond innocent sister was sent to the principal's office for bringing a dildo to school and making an obscene gesture with it to her teacher. What actually happened was she was drinking these weird protein shots, to bulk up for cheerleading or something, we'd gotten from Costco, which came in a long, pink, fairly phallic tubes, kind of like this, link.
That reminds me of this one time, where my teacher saw a student with this shampoo bottle, link.
Again, the other way round, when I was about 10 I wrote a report on beer. I had written to lots of breweries to ask for beer labels and basically described each brewery a little bit. One of the brewery's beers was Verboten Frucht, named after the forbidden fruit. It had a picture of Adam and Eve on it. Well, Eve was quite interesting to all the boys, as you can imagine. Had that label confiscated. I also failed that report. Edit just to answer some questions. Indeed, Dutch school, but the beer is Belgian. I think I failed the report for too much plagiarism. It did turn out alright, got my own brewery now.
Why did you fail it? It sounds like you put a ton of effort into it.
Weirdest thing was a papaya named Bob. But when I worked in a bridal shop a kid pulled a dildo out of mum's purse and started pretending it was a rocket ship, complete with noises and running around.
Not a teacher, but this is the worst thing I had confiscated. It was 1984 and I was 9 years old. Back then it was common for parents to buy loads of fireworks for November 5th in Britain, Guy Fawkes Night. I got a load of them on around November 1st and emptied them into a cardboard toilet roll that I'd sealed up at one end. Made a fuse from blue touch paper and stuck it in, then used masking tape to seal the top. I was 9 years old. I took it to school and was showing a kid in class during a lesson. The teacher, a guy in his 60s, saw I was distracting people, so called me up and asked what it was. I explained and he confiscated it. At the end of the day, he called me over, told me not to bring things like that into school and then gave it back to me. And that was the end of the matter, until I set it off a few days later and it set fire to a hedge. Kids, the 80s really were a different time.
Literally 1984.
Obligatory, not a teacher. I work with kids who have special needs. One of my kids brought in a ball gag and several of the largest butt plugs I have ever seen.
Not a teacher, but my 7th grade homeroom teacher confiscated my private journal and read it. There's nothing more disappointing than losing respect for elders as a child.
My 6th grade teacher forced us to journal and assured us that she would never read it. I was mad at her one day and blew off steam in the journal, and got called in during recess because she read it and was crying. Not my proudest moment, but I was furious that she didn't keep her promise.
I work, Ed, as a middle school language teacher. Every kid in class is assigned a Chromebook and we are encouraged to have the kids work on them. I let them sit together to encourage them to help each other out while they do some work on their devices. I see 2 kids at the back of the class, giggling and just watching the screen. No reading or writing happening. I get up slowly, watch them panic and start frantically clicking the mouse so as to close up the windows that weren't supposed to be open. I get to them and ask them what's funny. One of the kids says something about emails as I take the Chromebook from his desk. The only open tab is in fact the email. I sit down at a free desk close to his and use a trick I had just learned, which was to reopen tabs that had been recently closed. 1, twice, 3rd time's the charm. Full on P in VPO graphic video on screen. They found a way to bypass the school board security and were watching P in class. So I guess the confiscation of a Chromebook isn't exactly the worst, as opposed to what was on the Chromebook.
I didn't confiscate anything, but this is a good story nonetheless. One of my high school students, grade 10, so about 16 years old, walked into class and threw his school bag down on the ground beside his desk. About 20 minutes later, as I'm teaching, I smell beer. I called the student who threw his bag down on the ground over to my desk and took him outside into the hall. He told me he has a 6-pack of beer in his bag for a party after school and it broke when he threw his bag down. I told him to go and remove his bag and clean up the mess with paper towel. I didn't involve admin, call his parents, and the students didn't notice. He got rid of his bag, cleaned up the mess quietly and calmly, and we moved on with our day like nothing happened. Sometimes kids just make bad mistakes, and I could tell this kid was terrified about the consequences. My mom has had stories about what she's confiscated from lower elementary-aged students, K3. The usual prank items like whoopee cushions, sure. But one time a student was playing with this weird box. The box was locked, so she couldn't put it in the confiscated bin. She put it on top of a cabinet. About an hour later, it starts ringing. Furiously. It took some doing to get the box open. But turns out, this kid's parent was a professional chef. So the kid had grabbed every timer in the house, set them for the max amount of time, locked the box, brought it to school, and played with it so it would get confiscated and ring loudly. Whole class erupted with laughter and screaming. A true agent of chaos. Edit. Obligatory wow. And thank you for all of the awards. My first gold. Thank you, kind stranger.
This is like professional level FRE. In high school, before the internet, I had a locker full of P-mags that I would rent out to kids for $1 a night. I didn't know they cut locks off lockers and emptied them over the holidays. I so had some tiger claws and nunchucks confiscated.
A YouTube channel will 100% steal this post, so hi YouTube.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.